Watch him smile. Really watch it. The way it doesn't reach his eyes. The way it's calculated. The way it can vanish in a microsecond if the cameras stop rolling. Homelander doesn't want to be loved. He wants to be worshipped. And there's a difference, a chasm, really, between the two. Love requires reciprocity. Worship requires only submission. We're taught that narcissists are confident, arrogant, untouchable. But what if that confidence is a house of cards? What if beneath the God complex is a terrified child, screaming to be seen? Today, we're not asking, why is Homelander evil? We're asking something far more uncomfortable. Why does absolute power so often mask absolute fragility? And what does Homelander reveal about the narcissism we all carry? The desperate human need to be special, to be chosen, to be enough. Let's be honest. Homelander is terrifying. Not because he can shoot lasers from his eyes. Not because he can fly. Not even because he can kill you in an instant. But because he needs you to love him. And if you don't, he'll make you love him, or he'll destroy you. There is no middle ground. This is the paradox of narcissistic fragility. The more powerful the exterior, the more brittle the interior. Homelander can level a city, but he cannot tolerate a slight. He can hear every conversation in a mile radius, but he cannot hear his own pain. He is the most powerful being on Earth, and the most emotionally stunted. Sound familiar? We live in an age of curated perfection, of follower counts, validation metrics, personal brands. We've all felt it, that flicker of rage when we're ignored, that crushing shame when we're criticized, that desperate need to prove we matter. Homelander is that need, amplified to cosmic proportions. He is not an alien. He is an archetype, and to understand him, we must descend into the psychology of the wounded ego. Heinz Kohut, the father of self-psychology, proposed that narcissism is not a sin, it's a developmental need. Every child requires mirroring, the experience of being seen, admired, and validated by their caregivers. When this need is met, the child develops a cohesive, resilient self. When it's frustrated, the self fragments. And what is Homelander, if not a fragmented self with godlike powers? Raised in a laboratory, tested, measured, commodified, never held, never loved. Kohut would say, Homelander is not evil. He is arrested. His grandiosity is not confidence. It's a compensatory structure, a psychic prosthetic built to cover the wound of never being seen as a person. Every applause, every statue, every thank you for your service is an attempt to fill a void that cannot be filled from the outside. Kohut wrote, "The narcissistic personality is not in love with itself. It is in love with an idealized image of itself. Homelander doesn't love himself. He loves the idea of himself, the hero, the savior, the god. And when reality contradicts that image, he doesn't adjust the image. He destroys the reality." Otto Kernberg, the leading theorist on narcissistic personality organization, distinguished between healthy self-esteem and pathological grandiosity. The difference? Healthy self-esteem is integrated. It can tolerate criticism, acknowledge flaws, and maintain worth despite failure. Pathological grandiosity is defensive. It must deny weakness, punish critics, and maintain perfection at all costs. Kernberg identified the core feature of pathological narcissism: rage in response to narcissistic injury. Watch Homelander. Someone questions his authority? Rage. Someone sees his weakness? Rage. Someone dares to be indifferent to him? Unbearable rage. Kernberg would say, this is not strength. This is fragility masquerading as power. The more grandiose the fantasy, the more vulnerable the ego. Homelander's pathology is not that he thinks he's a god. It's that he cannot tolerate not being one. And this is the tragedy. The very defenses he built to protect himself, grandiosity, rage, devaluation, are the ones that ensure he will never receive the love he craves. Because love requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is the one thing Homelander would rather die than feel. Alice Miller, in her devastating work, The Drama of the Gifted Child, explored what happens when a child's worth is conditional on their performance rather than their existence. These children learn, I am loved not for who I am, but for what I can do. They become gifted, not necessarily in talent, but in their ability to meet their caregiver's needs. And Homelander? He is the ultimate gifted child, created for a purpose, valued for his powers, praised for his utility, never loved for himself. Miller wrote, the child's achievement is not an expression of his own self, but a substitute for the love he did not receive. Homelander's entire identity is a substitute for love. He saves people not because he cares, but because saving people earns him adoration. And when they don't adore him, when they criticize, question, or ignore him, the mask slips, because beneath the cape is not a hero. It's a child, still waiting for someone to look at him and say, you matter, not for what you can do, but for who you are. That child is still waiting, and he is furious. Karen Horney, breaking from Freud's biological determinism, argued that neurosis is born from interpersonal wounds, specifically the failure to receive genuine warmth and affection in childhood. To cope, the child creates an idealized self-image, a fantasy of who they should be to be worthy of love. This idealized self is perfect, powerful, admired, invulnerable, and it is a prison, because the real self, the flawed, human, vulnerable self, must be denied, hidden, destroyed. Horney called this the tyranny of the should. I should never make mistakes. I should always be strong. I should be loved by everyone. I should never need anyone. Sound like Homelander? He doesn't just want to be perfect. He must be perfect. Because if he's not perfect, he is nothing. Horney wrote, the neurotic's pride is not based on his real self, but on his idealized self. Homelander's pride is not in who he is. It's in who he pretends to be. And every time reality threatens that pretense, every time someone sees the crack in the armor, he doesn't just get angry, he gets existentially terrified. Because if he's not the hero, who is he? The answer, for Homelander, is unbearable. No one. D.W. Winnicott, the British pediatrician and psychoanalyst, introduced one of the most haunting concepts in psychology, the false self. When a caregiver cannot attune to the infant's needs, the infant learns to comply, to present what the caregiver wants rather than what they feel. This compliance becomes a false self, a defensive facade that protects the hidden, authentic, true self. The false self can be highly successful, charming, admired, powerful, but it is empty because it is not real. Winnicott wrote, the false self has a positive function in protecting the true self, but at the cost of making the individual feel unreal. Watch Homelander in public. The smile, the wave, the humble gratitude, the patriotic speech. It's perfect, and it's completely false. Now watch him in private. The rage, the cruelty, the emptiness, the desperate, clawing need for control. This is the true self, not because it's evil, but because it's real. Homelander's tragedy is not that he's a monster. It's that he doesn't know who he is beneath the costume. The false self has become so dominant, so total, that the true self has been buried alive. And like any buried thing, it screams to get out. Erich Fromm, writing in the shadow of totalitarianism, described a personality type that goes beyond ordinary narcissism: malignant narcissism. This is not just self-absorption. This is the pathology of power, the need to dominate, control, and destroy anything that threatens one's grandiosity. Fromm wrote, "The malignant narcissist is not simply in love with himself. He is in love with power over others." Why? Because power is the only thing that can silence the inner void. Homelander doesn't just want admiration. He wants absolute submission. He doesn't just want to be loved. He wants to be feared, because fear is reliable. Love is not. Fromm understood, the malignant narcissist is not powerful. He is terrified. Terrified of being ordinary. Terrified of being ignored. Terrified of being human. And so he destroys humanity in others and in himself. Let's examine the moments when the mask slips. The milk scene, the mirror breakdown, the laser-eyed rage at a civilian who dared to criticize him. These are not evil moments. They are fragile moments. Kohut defined narcissistic injury as any threat to the grandiose self-image, and narcissistic rage as the explosive response to that threat. Homelander's rage is disproportionate. Someone questions him, they die. Someone sees him cry, they die. Someone dares to have a life outside of him, they die. This is not justice. This is panic. Because every criticism, every indifference, every slight whispers the truth he cannot bear. You are not a god. You are a man, and a lonely one at that. Homelander's relationship with his mother, Madeline Stillwell, is the key to his pathology. She is not a mother. She is a handler. She doesn't love him. She manages him. And when she withholds affection, when she uses sex as a tool of control, when she calls him a little boy, she activates the deepest wound. I am unlovable. Alice Miller would say, Homelander's violence is not random. It is repetition. He is recreating the trauma of his childhood, the powerlessness, the rejection, the abandonment, over and over, hoping that this time he will win. Homelander doesn't believe he's a god because he's delusional. He believes it because he needs to. Because if he's not a god, he's just a lab experiment, a weapon, a product, a nobody. Adler would say, this is the inferiority complex in its most extreme form. The deeper the felt inferiority, the higher the compensatory grandiosity. Homelander doesn't fly because he's powerful. He flies because if he stops, he might fall. And if he falls, he might discover there's nothing beneath the cape. Let me be unequivocal. Understanding Homelander's fragility is not excusing his violence. Analyzing his narcissism is not sympathizing with his cruelty. We do this work not to forgive the unforgivable, but to recognize the patterns before they destroy us. Because Homelander is not just a supervillain, he is an extreme manifestation of a very human wound, the need to be special, the fear of being ordinary, the rage at being ignored. We all carry it. The question is, what do we do with it? Do we build a false self and demand worship? Or do we face our fragility, our ordinariness, our humanity, and choose to connect anyway? Jung said, I'd rather be whole than good. Wholeness means integrating our shadow, not letting it drive the car. It means acknowledging our need for validation, our fear of insignificance, our temptation to control, and choosing consciously to act with humility, empathy, and respect for others' autonomy. Homelander chose power over connection, grandiosity over intimacy, control over love, We can choose differently. So I ask you, where in your life do you perform instead of exist? Where do you demand admiration instead of seeking connection? Where do you rage when you're criticized because the criticism touches a wound you haven't healed? Homelander's tragedy is not that he's evil. It's that he never learned he was enough, not for his powers, not for his utility, not for his performance, but for his existence. And so he spends his life trying to become enough, through control, through fear, through destruction. But you cannot become enough. You already are. Your worth is not earned. It is inherent. And the moment you believe that, truly believe it, is the moment you stop needing the world to tell you so.